I appreciate everyone being here today. For those, of course, I can't see y'all, but I'm sure I know some of you. I'm Beth Herron. I'm the Associate Director of Research and Grant Development, which is part of the Office of Research at USC. And I have administered the Aspire program since it started, which was in the 2011-2012 academic year. So the way today's presentation is going to work is I have a brief PowerPoint that I'm going to go through, and then I'm going to open to questions, whatever questions y'all have. My presentation today is primarily focused on Aspire 1, but I can discuss and answer questions about either or both Aspire 2 and 3 if needed. Typically, when I've gone to both Upstate and Aiken in the past in person, most folks are interested in Aspire 1, but there have been people who are interested in the other programs. So just because my presentation and the PowerPoint might focus on that, don't feel as though I can't discuss the other two. Just a friendly reminder, make sure your microphone is muted so that if, fire truck or a dog or something goes through your environment, it doesn't disrupt things too much. So I'm PowerPoint and get started with that. All right, I hope I am. Okay, not sure why this is not working. Okay, sorry. I've not had a problem with this in the past.
You need to have the administrator give you permission to.
Oh, maybe. Or can I send it to you, Melissa? Or
you should have permission. I will.
I can't. It's not recognizing the PowerPoint, which is open on my desktop.
When you go to the share content, if you go to browse beside the PowerPoint, are you able to pull it up through your documents?
All I can see is the desktop window. Oh boy.
Do you have multiple screens?
No, I'm at home. I only have one screen. The only thing I can see is this meeting. And then I could share from the internet, but I can't share from my desktop. Okay, can I forward this PowerPoint to you and you can play it for me?
Absolutely.
All right, sorry, I have a little technical glitch. So give me 1 second. All right. All right, I'm going to send it to you. I've got to pull my email up. Okay. Apologize, of course, my computer's being really slow. Okay, so I just sent it, so hopefully you'll get it in just a minute. Someone said not a problem, par for the year. Yeah. I like those Geico commercial, or no, it's Progressive Insurance, where they're doing a meeting and everyone's talking, and it's kind of a funny reflection of this year. Have you gotten the PowerPoint, Nicole?
She hadn't as of just a second ago, but she's running back in to check.
Okay.
She was checking my computer too.
And I can also forward it to you.
I'm opening it now.
Okay.
At the moment.
All right. Well, I'll just tell you next. You can't be, hopefully it'll be somewhat clear when you're supposed to change, but I've not had that issue where I can't share something from my, I don't know if it's just because of this computer I'm on or.
It's possibly.
Okay, there it is. Okay, thank you. All right, so move to the first slide. Aspire. Okay, so just an overview of the program. We have, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, Dr. Nagarkati, our Vice President for Research, started Aspire as a system-wide program in the 2011-2012 academic year. And since then, we have funded 597 faculty projects, so nearly 600 projects. Our annual funding, which will be the case again this year, has been approximately $2 million. It was the first couple of years, it was about $2.5 million, but since then it's been right around either slightly under or slightly over $2 million. And that has led to an over $18 million total investment in Aspire in research across our entire system since 2012, which I think is pretty remarkable. And this is a program that I'm always very proud to be involved with. Next slide. Okay, I wanted to highlight the senior campuses and submissions from senior campuses. This is from last year. For Aspire 1, we had 10 submissions from the 3 senior campuses and 4 were funded. So it's about a 40% success rate. And then for the larger Aspire 2 and 3, between those 2 tracks from the 3 senior campuses, there were 4 submissions and 1 was funded, which was an Aspire 3 from USC Beaufort. All right, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk about all the Aspire tracks and then focus on Aspire 1. So Aspire has 3 large tracks. The first is Aspire 1, which are smaller investigator-initiated projects. And between all the ones, it covers faculty of any rank across our campuses. And then we also have Aspire 2, which are larger collaborative proposals, and Aspire 3, which is for equipment and infrastructure. So within Aspire 1, there are 4 tracks, and sometimes that confuses people a little bit. But there's Aspire 1, Track 1, which is for junior faculty. That is tenure track, assistant professor. So you're not yet tenured, but you're in the tenure track. Track 2, which probably doesn't apply as much to our senior campuses, but are funds for research or clinical faculty. So faculty who are not on the tenure track. Track 3 provides bridge funding. That's for faculty who perhaps have had a grant, an external grant, and that's coming to an end and they're applying for renewal or the next step in funding and they need something to continue supporting, you know, laboratory animals or a student or, you know, field work. And then track 4 is for senior faculty, and that is tenured associate or full professor. So once you've had tenure, then you apply to track 4. Okay, next slide. All right, as I mentioned a minute ago, Aspire 2 can be funded up to $100,000, and these are collaborative proposals. You have to have at least 3 faculty involved representing diverse disciplines. You can't have 3 chemistry professors apply for an Aspire 2. And the lead PI must have some history of success with building collaborative teams and with securing extramural grant funding. And then Aspire 3 is to build infrastructure and to purchase equipment. And that's also could be funded up to $100,000. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what are some budget considerations? We're going to move now to focus on Aspire 1. So the maximum budget for Aspire 1, which are tracks 1, 3, and 4, is $15,000. For track 2, which again was the research or clinical faculty, it's $10,000. You can ask for up to 1 month of salary for the PI only. And this is allowable, it's not required. You don't have to ask for faculty salary, but many people do. Typically, it's summer salary. Although in some disciplines, especially on Columbia campus, they prefer to ask for it in the academic year so that they can get relief from teaching. This is allowable, but you still have to describe it as a month, not release or course buyout. So that's something important to note. Now for 2021, and I'm touched on this in yesterday's session, last year, when people submitted to Aspire, it was in early to mid-January, and none of us knew what was coming around the corner, which was COVID. So people had prepared proposals not knowing how dramatically people's lives were going to change in the upcoming months. So we held the review panel meetings, which was after COVID. It was in late March and April. We asked reviewers to pretend that, to not judge proposals based on COVID. So if someone had a project that planned a lot of international travel or work in schools or a lot of face-to-face contact with patients, we said that, just rate the proposals based on their merits as a research proposal and ignore the fact that this might be difficult to accomplish because of COVID, because when they submitted it, they had no way of knowing. Now, that's not the truth. That's not the case this year. We know that COVID is here. We know that things have changed. And if you do have a project where you are proposing travel, especially international travel, or where you're proposing a lot of work in schools or face-to-face work, you at a minimum really need to address how you will accomplish that within the timeline provided based on restrictions with COVID. Especially travel. I mean, the university itself still has restrictions in place. It's difficult for Americans to travel to places like even Canada or Europe or elsewhere in the world. So you need to address in your proposal and in your budget justification how you would do the work if you have a lot of your budget going for travel, especially. And I would say work in schools as well, because some schools are reopened face-to-face, but they're limiting visitors or, probably limiting research projects within schools right now. So you really need to be mindful of that, because I think that will be a basis and a fair basis of review this cycle. We felt it was unfair last time just because people could not have anticipated it. Unallowable costs for Aspire always are food, and that is food used as a research incentive. So if you have a focus group of teenagers and you want to provide pizza, unfortunately, Aspire funds cannot pay for that. That's something that the central administration has determined. We don't agree with it, but we can't change it. And then we have never allowed, now this is not just a COVID thing, we have never allowed travel to professional conferences as part of Aspire funds, so you cannot request that. Next slide. Okay, so how do you apply for Aspire? Well, first of all, you need to follow the guidelines outlined in the request for proposals. And those requests for proposals, if you haven't already gotten it from our ResDev messages or elsewhere, can be found on the VPR's website. If you go to the USC homepage, type Aspire in the search block, it's right up. So you need to be, and I'm not going to sit and read through the guidelines. I've never done that as part of Q&As because I figure y'all can do that. But the general guidelines for Aspire 1 are it's a 3-page proposal, and that you can use 11-point font and 1/2-inch margins on all sides. There are some required attachments, like you have to have a 2-page and not more than 2-page. You can't use your full academic CV, but a 2-page CV can be in any format, just depending on what your discipline is. You need to have, most proposals, research proposals obviously have references. So you have to have a list of works cited or a reference list. And I'll talk some more about appendices and other materials in a couple minutes. You need to apply through our internal proposal routing system, USERA. And when I did this Q&A yesterday, we had a lot of first-year faculty online. So at the end, I stayed on, and I offer to do that today as well. I can just go quickly through Sarah and show you how it works. It is straightforward, but if you haven't used it before and you would like to see it, I'm happy to do that. You need to submit by the deadline, and the deadline this year is January 21st, 2021. And you have to submit by 5 p.m. And that's submitted. It does not have to be fully approved. And in USERA, you have an approval chain. It would be your chair, chancellor's office before it comes to me. So you don't have to have all those approvals, but you do have to have it submitted and finalized in USERA by 5 o'clock on the deadline. Okay, next slide. Okay, so once you've submitted, what happens? Well, the deadline is in late January. We convene panels. Aspire is a peer-reviewed competition, and those panel meetings are typically held in mid-March through early April. Each proposal has 2 reviewers, and I think this is one of the most important things that I can say in the presentation. They will be from related disciplines, but they will not necessarily, and in fact, almost certainly will not be from your exact discipline. So we're not asking a history professor to read a chemistry proposal or vice versa. But what we may do is have a biology faculty member read a chemistry proposal or an English faculty proposal. So when you're writing your proposal, you have to think that your reviewer is going to be a colleague, a faculty colleague, and an educated person, but is not necessarily going to know everything, or in fact might not know a lot about your specific discipline. We use faculty reviewers from across all of our campuses. Every single panel has multiple reviewers from our senior and Palmetto College campuses, but then also a lot of reviewers from Columbia campus. So it's a very diverse panel in terms of representation from all of our system campuses. The proposals are read and scored and receive comments. Every single proposal, whether it's funded or not, you will receive feedback. And then we hold panel meetings to discuss the proposals and where they fall. And then these panels make recommendation for funding to Dr. Nagarkati, the Vice President for Research, and he makes the final funding decisions. In most years, Aspire 1 proposals, and this is across all 4 tracks, have had a success rate of between 40 and 50%. And if you've submitted external grants, you know that that is an incredible success rate. Most external funding agencies are funding at less than 20 and a lot even less than 10% these days. So again, the success rate has been around that 45% mark in almost every year. Okay, next slide. I get a lot of questions about, how can I make my proposal competitive? Well, the first and most important thing is to follow the directions outlined in the request for proposals. And when I would do these presentations in person, I would often see when I said that, people their eyes, of course I'm going to follow directions, but not everyone does. And you're really eliminating yourself from that 50% if you haven't followed the directions in the RFP. Another important thing is to make sure that it's feasible to complete your project in the time allowed, which is a 15-month project period. Our suggested date range is from July 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022. We will make exceptions to that if for some reason you need to start earlier, and within the budget. So this is a 15-month project for $15,000. If your proposal says I'm going to beat Elon Musk to Mars and I'm going to do it by next October, that probably is not going to seem feasible to reviewers. And that's something that trips a lot of folks up. They try to be very ambitious, and as a result, the proposal comes across as something that's not doable in the time period or with the funds provided. Ask a colleague who is not in your field to read your proposal and to comment on clarity. And that goes back to who is going to be reviewing your proposal. If you ask a friend in another department to read your proposal and he or she cannot understand it, that means the reviewer is probably not going to be able to understand it. Every year I'll get a call from someone who wasn't funded and they say, well, they didn't understand my work. And that's because it hadn't been presented in a clear way. And I know at Upstate, Elaine, Marshall, and Melissa are willing to review and read over Aspire. So if you're there, please use that resource. It's really valuable. Building on that, have someone, a friend, a relative, a colleague, a stranger, proofread your work. And again, proofreading, it seems basic, but a proposal with lots of grammatical errors, lots of spelling errors, you know, that looks like it's just been cut and pasted from different sources. Those proposals, you know, fall to the bottom and then are not even discussed in the panel meeting, because we get so many proposals to Aspire 1, you know, similar to an agency like NIH or NSF, we can't discuss all of them. So if your proposal is really sloppy, you're going to miss out on that discussion portion of the review process. Pay attention to the requested and required supplementary information. So it isn't just the 3-page proposal. As I mentioned a minute ago, you need to have the bio sketch, a reference list. If you have been funded by the VPR's office previously, that includes RISE, or if you've received Aspire previously, you need to have a separate page that addresses what you accomplished with those funds. This does not include Magellan, because Magellan is an award to the student. And, you know, often reviewers will look at that and they'll say, look, gosh, this person had a RISE grant 3 years ago and had a great publication from it, or, you know, had some really good presentations at conferences. So reviewers do look at that and take note if you've been productive with our office's funds previously. Appendices are allowed. Do not use them to add on to your proposal and get around the page limitations. Things that you can and maybe should, depending on your discipline, include in an appendix are letters of support. If you're proposing let's say a book, you're finishing a book chapter or a book project and you're under contract to a publisher, by all means include that. We had an Aspire funded, I think it was 2 years ago, and the PI was already under contract to a good publishing house, and that letter alone probably put him into the funding range. You can include comments if you've submitted an external grant and not gotten funded, and have that reviewer feedback that says, if only there was pilot data, or if only they had done this, and you are going to use the Aspire for that, you can include that. There are a number of things you can include in the appendices, but just don't use it to get around that 3, because I know 3 pages isn't a lot, but don't think you're going to sneak stuff into the appendix to get around it. You need to ensure that your proposal has a scholarly impact beyond the university. And that can be any number of things. A lot of people think, oh, Aspire, you have to go on and get external grants. And if that's the case, that's wonderful. A lot of Aspires do provide funding for pilot projects or seed data, and then people go on to get funded externally. But you don't have to. So it can be external grant submissions. It can be submitting an article to a peer-reviewed publication. It can even be things like art exhibitions or musical compositions. It doesn't have to be, you know, just external grants, but it has to be research that has an impact beyond our campus and brings recognition to our, you know, to our University of South Carolina system in different ways. We had someone from our art department last year receive an Aspire, and the result of her work was a major pottery exhibition. So it definitely doesn't have to be just external grant submissions, but it does have to be something significant in your field that goes beyond the walls of the university. Okay, next slide. Okay, just a few final thoughts with the slides. Do not submit your proposal at 4:59 on the deadline date. And every year someone does. I am here and really happy to answer questions, both via email, and I try to respond to emails quickly, and phone. And I'm even happy to look at a draft of your, whole application. I cannot comment on your science or your, what you're proposing, but I can say, hey, look, you're forgetting this, or you should have an appendix. And I have done that, and I'm happy to do it, but I can't do it at 4:00 on the day of the deadline. So you have to plan ahead for that. And again, that deadline is Thursday, January 21st, 2021 by 5 p.m. submitted into you, Sarah. Okay, you can end the slideshow, and then I'll take questions. Thank you. Okay, so what questions do people have? You can either ask via the chat, or you could unmute or do your video. I'll see if no questions so far.
No questions at this time.
Okay. All right. I saw someone named Krista, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So I have a couple of questions, I guess, about the funding and like what can be covered and what can't be for the Aspire 1.
Okay.
Track 1, I guess.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering, I know that Aspire 1 is not the one where it's meant to be multiple collaborative faculty, but can more than one person be, like DIY be included on Aspire 1, or does it have to be just one faculty member?
I couldn't hear you completely, but I think your answer was about collaborations. And you can certainly collaborate with other faculty, either on your own campus or at Columbia campus, or you can even collaborate with faculty outside of the USC system. Only the PI can have salary from Aspire 1. You can have a small subcontract to another university if you wanted to, or pay someone from another university as a consultant. I would just caution you not to have too much of your budget going for that, because Aspire is meant to, support our faculty and build our capacity in research. So I hope that answered your question. But yes, you certainly may collaborate with people, and it should include their bio sketches, but you just can only you can have the month of salary.
Okay, so in general, because I'm looking at it and it says like co-PI, and so you're saying that whoever submits it is really the PI. It can't be two faculty members working together as co-PIs.
You can have co-PIs working together, but someone has to be the lead PI, and it would be the person who submits it.
And only that person could then
Correct.
have month. Okay.
Yeah.
And then relatedly, so I'm looking and it says that postdoctoral fellows can be an allowable cost.
Yes.
And does that mean that our school, sorry, there's like lawn mowing going outside the window. Does that mean that our school would have to have basically a postdoctoral, or not postdoctoral, I guess, like, because I'm thinking more of like post-baccalaureate, like, do we have to then have that program here?
Well, if it's a postdoc, they would have to be a USC employee for you to pay them. And it could be a postdoc even on Columbia's campus or somewhere else. Or you can pay a student if you have a really good student up there that you'd like to include. Their salary can be included. A graduate student from anywhere in our system. So you definitely can have other kinds of, you could even hire someone, if you wanted to hire someone on a part-time basis as a research associate to do, if it's work in a lab or something, that's like a technician, that's also okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think I have a couple chat questions, but I'll take out Scott Tanner. I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have a question about Aspire 2, and I don't know if you're going to come to that later.
Well, I think I'll address that in the question. So you certainly feel free to go ahead and ask, and I'll talk a little bit more about it too.
Yeah, I asked this question last year, I think, but we never got around to it. So I'm relatively new, and we have another relatively new person in biochemistry, and we've effectively doubled our cell and molecular faculty number, and we're kind of in need of some smaller pieces of equipment, maybe 10 to 20,000 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to write an Aspire 2 and try to kind of combine a few of those? Because I think the limit was 100,000, but if we needed like 3 pieces of equipment that were totaled 60,000, is that acceptable, or does it really need to be for one particular piece of equipment?
No, well, first of all, I think you're asking for Aspire 3, which is the equipment.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, you certainly can do that. In fact, and when I do Q&As for that, I tell people this. Sometimes it's to your advantage to have a proposal that's not the full 100,000.
Okay.
Because if there's a little, like, oh, we can fund one more, but not up for 100,000, then yours gets funded. But you can have, and we've had them funded for several small pieces of equipment. That as long as they meet that equipment threshold, which is at least $5,000,
Okay.
that's perfectly fine. The only thing I would caution you with Aspire 3 and equipment is that if it's something, that we have a lot of the equipment at Columbia campus, or if it's at Aiken or somewhere, to do your research and to just justify, why it's an impediment for you to not be able to travel to use that equipment, that it would really help you to have it on your campus. And it's something that you don't have in your general area to, like even at Furman or somewhere to use.
Okay.
Because that does come up in review discussion for Aspire 3.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of the chat questions and get to more of the people put their hands up. Someone asked, would it be a detriment to ask for less than $1,500? Which, if you meant 15,000, that's not a detriment. If it's really 1,500, that is I would say that is a detriment. Even though that sounds odd, I think proposals that ask for a very small amount tend to be downgraded because it doesn't seem as though there's enough there. It's not a strong enough research proposal because it's such a small amount of money. So I would say that, if you meant 15,000, you just want to ask for 12,000 or something, that's fine. But I would not submit an Aspire that was for a very small amount, like $1,000. If I have one other chat question, if one of the collaborators in Aspire 1, not the PI, is tenured or in their critical year, would they be able to apply to track 1? Well, first of all, the track is chosen by what the lead PI is. However, we often have people who submit an Aspire 1, track 1, and then, between the time they apply and the time they're funded, they receive tenure. That's fine. You'll be listed as an Aspire 1, track 1 recipient, but you apply for where you are on the day of the application. So if you're still in the tenure track, you would apply to that track. Okay. All right. Bridget, I think, had her hand up next.
Yeah. Okay. So my question is, for the Aspire 3,
Yes.
We are doing a design studio. Well, we already have the location, and we're actually already in it. We're looking for funding for equipment and signage. So by signage, I mean our university paid for the classic metal sign that's pretty inexpensive, but because we are a design/marketing agency, we want to kind of flare it up a little bit, and the cost of that kind of flare with the outside decals and the graphics is a little bit more than what we can kind of ask for. So would that count as equipment in that Aspire 3? I mean, what's the theme or the general consensus? Is that something probably not put in there, or?
Yeah, I mean, just my gut would be I would not put something like that in there. You certainly can ask for equipment, like if you wanted a really fancy printer or a 3D printer or, whatever kinds of things you need to outfit the studio. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, I'd like a better sign.
Well, my question is,
I would say that would not be an expense.
With other agencies and design firms, can we not justify it in that sense that is kind of the normal, the norm in that type of world to, be able to advertise yourself like that?
Well, I mean, and I definitely appreciate that, but I would still say that I think that would be outside the bounds of Aspire 3. And I'll give an example. It's not the same kind of example, but a couple of years ago, we had a request from someone at Columbia campus that did marine research to purchase a boat. And the boat they wanted was really kind of a top-end boat. And we happened to have several people on the review panel who really knew a lot about boating. And they said, well, they don't need, they might need a new boat because the request was valid because they did a lot of research on the water, but they wanted something with all the bells and whistles that you might, like, this is my dream boat. And it didn't get funded. And then they resubmitted and kind of scaled back, and it did get funded.
Okay.
And to me, that sign kind of falls into that same, it's like a bell or whistle, and it doesn't really impact the work. I mean, it may in terms of your being able to attract clients, but
I guess I was just looking at as far as visibility of branding the university being on Main Street. That's where we're kind of coming from. Okay. I
mean, my gut feeling would be that would be a hard sell.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate it.
TP, I see you have your hand raised.
Hey, I sent an proposal last year for Aspire 3, and there I got a comment saying that some of those equipments may have in the Columbia campus, but I have to justify why I need a double in the USC Aiken campus.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and as I mentioned, I think with the Aspire 3, with the equipment requests, the reviewers do like to see that, let's say you're requesting a specific piece of equipment on Aiken, but if you've never made the effort, and I'm not saying this is true, but if you've never made the effort to come to Columbia to use our equipment, or you're not making regular trips there, and you're just asking for this equipment, they think, well, he's never even been to Columbia to use it. So I think you have to have a strong justification for why you need it at Aiken and why it's an impediment for you to drive to Columbia, which I'm not saying it's a pain to drive 2 hours round trip to use equipment. But if I were you, I might reach out to whoever, whatever piece of equipment is, if it's here on Columbia campus, to reach out to the PI who controls that and say, okay, can I come take a look at this, or can I do something with it? I think that really strengthens some Aspire 3 submissions from the senior campuses.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Melissa? No, okay.
Dr. Pilgrim, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was just going to piggyback on that last question, where if we travel to Columbia, if they have the equipment, if we're coming in from one of the senior campuses, that would be a type of travel funding we could request, correct? Because often from our home universities, we wouldn't have the funding to actually make the trip to and from Columbia. And so when we're in a non-COVID world, would that count as travel essential to conduct the work?
It could, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I see there's a chat question also about Aspire 3. Can salary be funded? And the answer to that is generally no, unless it's the salary of a technician who is helping, let's say, build out a lab or something, like a USC facilities person. But faculty and student salary cannot be funded from Aspire 3. Because really the focus is on equipment. Are there other questions?
Just a quick one. I'm wondering about requesting monies for software versus hardware. Is one more amenable than the other?
Software definitely is allowable, and that's something we see fairly routinely. Hardware requests, I mean, we do allow the purchase of laptops or desktops as part of Aspire funding. It's just considered a supply. Sometimes reviewers might focus on that. Well, you know, don't they already have a laptop or desktop? But if it's something you can justify that you need, that is allowable. But software, especially with a specific kind of application, definitely is 100% fine. And, you know, again, a fairly routine expense request.
Okay, Beth, since it kind of got quiet for a second, I'm really excited looking over the list of participants because we have such a wide range of disciplines out there listening to the workshop. And so have you noticed any patterns or anything that helps convey scholarly activity or impact kind of across disciplines? So you talked about music, we've heard about graphic arts, we know we have the natural sciences. Do you have any advice that way?
Well, I would just say to really convey what the importance of your work is to your field and really go through that step by step with the reviewer. And I'll actually give an example. We recently had a special competition related to racial justice. And we had someone from our School of Music apply. And there was no one on the panel who was a musician. But the reviews for that proposal were phenomenal because he had done such a great job of conveying, you know, the significance of the composition he was proposing. And he really led the reviewers step by step. He did include a link to previous works he had done, and I know the reviewers listened to at least one of, you know, some of it and were impressed with it. So you really need to look at look at who is reviewing your proposal and make sure that you really sell the importance of your work to your field and how it can help advance, you know, you as a scholar and you as a researcher, but also can help make some kind of impact in your field, whether that be through a composition or an article or, you know, research that might help someone medically or public health. And, you know, we have funded proposals in almost every discipline imaginable since we started Aspire. So I know occasionally we get comments, oh, this is more for STEM, and it's really not. I mean, the humanities and social sciences, we funded a huge variety of Aspire projects in those fields. And, you know, just have had a lot of different impacts through the Aspire program. Other questions? You can ask either in the chat or raise your hand or just turn off unmute yourself. All right, well, I'll just say that, again, if you have questions about Aspire between now and the deadline, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm happy to answer those questions. And again, I know if you're at Upstate's campus, their Office of Research there is a really good resource as well for proposal review and to take a look. Now, if you are applying, we've had quite a few questions about the larger Aspire 3. That deadline is not until February 25th. So you have a little more time to prepare that. Bridget, you have another question.
Yeah, okay, so my colleague that I'm doing this with, he couldn't attend the meeting, but I just texted him what you said about the importance of the work to our field, show high levels of significance, look at who is reviewing the proposal, and still importance of work to our field and how it can make an impact. So he sent back a message. He said, well, that's the part I don't understand because our work is what it is. It's design work. It's not some significant research that's advancing the field. So any kind of insight how we could kind of, I mean, yeah.
Well, in your case, it may also, a lot of times for Aspire 3, even though this is not in the guidelines, every single year for Aspire 3 proposals that have a strong student education component do well. So I'm sure yours would have that because you have students working in this lab, I believe. So I would really, you can approach it from that angle, that you are training these students in a fantastic, occupation, and they're
So
learning on the job, and they're contributing to the community, and they're having an impact on
should we
the
highlight
Spartanburg
the
community.
student awards that they get every year at the local ad agency levels because of the program?
Absolutely, I would
Okay.
discuss that. Because, so you're right, your work is not necessarily, want this microscope so I can look at cells and try to cure cancer. But it's important in your area and to these students who will go on to have great careers. And I think that education aspect, even though that is not directly stated in the RFP, I'll tell you that a lot of proposals that incorporate that, they're definitely rated higher than proposals that don't discuss that at all for Aspire 3, because the reviewers like to see students using this equipment that we're going to purchase.
Okay.
I mean, or if it's a lab, like working in those labs. For Aspire 3 proposals that have, I guess, one person and he wants to buy something and only he's using it and not let it sharing with anyone, those do poorly and are not funded.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I will say for Aspire 3, because we receive the most proposals we've ever received for Aspire 3 is like 22. So it's a smaller panel, and most of the proposals skew to the STEM fields. So that is the one panel where the reviewers will be like farthest afield from, let's say, your discipline.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to guide the reviewers through, like the educational significance, the significance to the community, because I think that's the panel where you're least likely to have someone who's even near your field reading the proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Just as because when you have 20 proposals and 18 of them are like STEM, you know what I mean? I always try to have very diverse panels in terms of discipline, but at some point it's not workable. So you really need to make sure your proposal is clear. It's just
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Aspire 1 Track 4, innovative clarification. Does this exclude projects? No, it does not exclude projects that are early stages of data collection. In fact, Aspire 1 proposals can be used for early stages of data collection. We will, if it's a relatively new area for you or a new direction, that's something we like to see for Aspire 1 Track 4. If you're a senior faculty who's had success in one area and you want to branch out to something else. So you could definitely use the funds to help you with that data collection. You just need to outline where you would go once you collect the data, what your next steps would be then to, what you would do with that data, whether that would be an article. Piggybacking on the equipment question, at Aspire 1 is cost allowable for proprietary social science. Oh, see more. Yes, you can ask. You can purchase data sets with Aspire 1 funding. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So you just would need to justify, why you would need the data set and how you would utilize it. Okay, other questions? Had a lot of really good questions today.
So if that's it, yeah, I was going to ditto what just came in across the chat, the thank you so much, and just remind everybody out there, she's really serious. Reach out for help. She is a great resource. Beth has always been very supportive and is very quick to respond. And so that being said, thank you all for attending. And Beth, thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. As I said at the start, there are some aspects of doing all these virtual meetings that have been a positive. And I think these Aspire Q&As are definitely one. They've definitely increased participation, which is a good thing. It's made it so much easier, I think, for people to sit down for an hour and participate this way rather than having to try to find parking or find a room or walk across campus. Even though I miss coming to the system campuses, I always enjoy visiting them. I glad to see so many people participate in this kind of session. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, thank you again. And I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you. Same to y'all. Yeah, it's Friday. Yay.
Yeah. And we'll be in touch next week too.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.